I had a choice. And that choice was to use a gun that my husband had in our closet for protection, or to face what I had done and start healing myself. I got a 51-month sentence in federal prison for my conviction and for committing the crime that I did. I started out in prison in Waseca, Minnesota, which is a low to medium prison. It is a world in itself, something that I thought I'd never experience and something that you just cannot prepare for. I disassociated a lot, removed myself from situations. It had gotten so bad at one point that I would forget entire days. If I could get through this, and if I could work on myself, that my goal was to come out the other end and help people.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Broken Beautiful Me, stories of hope, gratitude, and resilience. This is a sacred space for honest conversations and soul-deep healing. I'm Kelly Buckley, your host, and each story we share and honor is a gentle reminder that even in our brokenness, we are beautifully becoming through hope, gratitude, and the quiet strength of resilience. Today, I am so fortunate to have as our guest Ranae Van Roekel. Ranae never imagined the word felon would be part of her identity. A mother, grandmother, wife, and dog lover, Ranae's path to incarceration was shaped not only by her decisions, but by decades of unresolved trauma. In prison, she finally confronted the pain she had long buried. That reckoning became the foundation for her healing. Today, Ranae is the founder of Connecting to Cope, a platform built to empower individuals with the tools, stories, and support they need to heal and grow, regardless of their past. Through self-care, education, and community, she's helping others rewrite their stories just as she continues to rewrite her own. I love that, Ranae. Welcome to the show. I'm so happy you were able to come on.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so proud of you for what you've built here, and so happy to be part of your podcast. I'm excited to tell my story and share with some of your listeners about how we can be resilient and about how we can use that resilience to honor gratitude in our life and be grateful for what's around us.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. When you look back on your journey, can you provide our listeners with kind of a little bit of history about how you started connecting to cope and the journey that you had before that kind of led up to that?
I can. And as you said before, I had many titles in my life. I think all of us do. I was a coworker, a wife, a friend, a mother, recently a grandmother, which is the best ever. And something I didn't expect to be in that repertoire was the word felon. And what led me to that title is, as you said, unresolved trauma. I had an abuse situation when I was younger. And because of how that was handled within my family, I was told to be silent about it. People would think I was bad, not my male perpetrators. And back in the 70s, that was true, Kelly. That is really, I think, how we thought of people who got sexually abused back in those days. Other people thought that there was something that I did that caused that event to happen, a traumatic event that really did change who I was, change my life. And now I know not only for the bad, but for the good, and that I could take that trauma, that event, and turn it into helping others as well as changing my life.
So you were growing up, you had this unresolved trauma. And so how did that evolve then into, you becoming, as you said, that descriptor of the word felon? How did that evolve?
Okay, so I handled my trauma in very negative ways. My coping skills were not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I shoved it under the proverbial rug, and I became a people pleaser. Anything that I could do to please others and make sure that I looked good so people wouldn't see the broken me under the professional or the mom me, I would use. And I disassociated a lot, removed myself from situations. It had gotten so bad at one point that I would forget entire days. And I knew I needed help, but I didn't get it. And what I did was got involved in a criminal activity involving resale tickets that led me to a federal conviction. And those were my choices.
Yep.
I did not take care of my trauma, which is all on me. I was the only one who could take care of it. And I made the choices to commit the crimes or crime that I committed. And that led me to be convicted of a mail fraud charge. And I got a 51-month sentence in federal prison for my conviction and for committing the crime that I did. It was a hard it was a hard acceptance for me. And I'll tell you, the day that I basically accepted that I needed to get help with my trauma and that I needed to accept what I had done, both things, I had a choice. And that choice was to use a gun that my husband had in our closet for protection, or to face what I had done and start healing myself. And a lot of the reason I chose to start healing myself and quote unquote face the music is because I wanted my husband and my kids to know the true story, that it wasn't as bad as the media portrayed it. It was not, um, yeah, there's a lot more to my story than others were talking about. And part of that was my trauma and not being healed. So that is the road that I took to healing, to admitting what I had done, taking responsibility for what I had done and what led up to those choices.
It, that must have been both an incredibly difficult journey, but also an incredibly healing one at the same time, as you faced the wounds that you had never named before, um, and made that relationship back to, okay, so this is what I went through in my younger years, and now this is what it's resulted in because I have not dealt with, and I mean, no fault of your own, you were a child. Um,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Um, and I had not shared that with anyone. My mother knew what had happened, and one of my older sisters knew, and obviously my perpetrators. And I had not even shared that with my husband.
Mm.
And I did. I shared it with him, told him what happened, and shared what I had been doing because he did not know about my crime as well. And so that was a revelation in our relationship and a revelation to me, that I could still have someone care for me, even though I had made very poor choices and didn't deal with what I should have dealt with. And that was the start of my healing. When he said, what do we need to do to, first of all, you take accountability for your crime, and second of all, heal you? And that was his order. I knew my order was, yes, I had to take accountability for my crime and face what I had to do with that. But I also knew if I was never going to do anything like that again, or at least try very hard not to do anything like that again, that I had to start the healing process. Little did I know how hard that healing process is. And I think anybody out there who's faced a trauma or faced a similar situation, maybe it's not incarceration, maybe it's just life choice. I shouldn't say just, maybe it's life choices that have led you to shunning everyone from your life, or drug abuse, or dealing with abuse in your own relationships. It is work to heal, but that work is so refreshing. And what I thought would be a horrific time in my life, and I'm not telling you prison was pleasant, because it wasn't. And I learned a lot about our criminal justice system, which in turn also makes me an advocate to change that. But I also took advantage for the first time in my life of only being me and not having to care or take care of others. And that is where my healing started. I had a great therapist in prison. She was wonderful, and she started my healing journey with me. And I am forever grateful for that. Something else that I realized during that time is that you needed to be resilient, and that resiliency carries over into everything in your life. And that even though I never thought I had things to be grateful for, I had more things to be grateful for than many people do, and how fortunate I was for that.
Mm. It That's incredible that you were able to have kind of those light bulb moments for yourself while you were incarcerated. And it's so good to hear that you had a great therapist that you were able to access during that time. Um, when you heal those wounds, and I mean, a lot of people talk these days about shadow work, right? I mean, it must have been. I mean, there's no really word for it. Like when you stop feeling the shame and you move past the wound. Um, how did that feel for you when you were able to say, "Okay, I was a child. This happened." I mean, that must have been such a release for you.
And indeed it was, Kelly. I I had never felt relief like that before, because the only thing I heard in my head, and I'll go back a little bit here. So the day that my big abuse happened, I went home, and um, the thing that I remember that my mother said to me was, "Don't ever speak of this. They will think you are bad, not your perpetrators." So in my head, and for years, for 30 some years, the only thing I heard in my head was the word, "You're bad." And I know now that that is not what she was saying. And I know now, because of what happened to me, I was not bad. But that is the life I lived with that in the back of my head. Well, what's the difference if I'm doing this because I'm bad anyway? I don't deserve this because I'm bad anyway. And that is what I lived with for, most of my adult life. And I know I changed, obviously, after the abuse. I did not trust people the way I used to. I grew up in a tiny little town, and everybody knew everybody, and you trusted everybody, which was, part of how my abuse happened. But I didn't realize how untrusting I became because of what happened to me,
Hmm.
and how untrusting of myself I became. And that, I believe, is just something, God, do I have the judgment to realize if another person is, on the straight and narrow or not? And by healing, I learned that I do have that ability, and that the only person I can control at the end of the day is myself. And it's wonderful to know that I now do have the ability to choose who I let in my life, and to know that I am not all bad. We're all made up of positives and negatives. And that, yes, I have made some very poor choices. I hurt people, both people I knew, both people I didn't know. And that is regret. I have regret for that, remorse. Um, but I no longer have shame for the abuse that happened to me.
Right.
And that is freeing.
It must be. Um, Talk to me a little bit about forgiveness. What role has forgiveness played in this journey for you?
Oh, a lot. First of all, I think the person who I needed to forgive first and foremost for the abuse part of it was me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I blamed myself, which I think a lot of quote unquote victims do.
Yep.
And then when I had victims, I saw that many of them blamed themselves for what I did to them. And many of the monetary amounts, I like with the mail fraud charge, were small, but it doesn't matter how small they were. I still victimized them. They were my victims. And I have asked for forgiveness. I've gotten some forgiveness. I've not gotten some. And that is difficult for me, but I realize it's their choice to give it to
Mm-hmm.
me or not give it to me. And I am working on forgiving myself for what I did to others. And that's still something I work on every day. In the healing journey, as you well know, it is constant work.
Yeah.
Um, it is constant work, constant, creating new coping skills and creating, new ways to deal with an event that triggers either your own personal trauma or something you did to others, which is also a form of PTSD. Then add in prison. So we have some PTSD there. And every day is still work and a challenge. But at the core of it all, as you say, is forgiveness, forgiving yourself, forgiving those that hurt you, and hoping someday that you will be given forgiveness. And that's where I'm at in my journey. So
Mm-hmm.
with the forgiveness thing, and very, very vital, as you said, I don't know how forgiveness fits into your story, Kelly, but I'm sure it's a difficult one with that as well.
I think we all, each and every person on the globe, we all struggle with the concept of forgiveness. And when we're younger, we have a very different view of it. As we age, we, become a little more seasoned. Um, we understand that it is a gift that we give ourselves, not so much something that we are doing for somebody on the outside. But you're right. I think it's a struggle that we as humans, we all have to walk that path
Yep.
to understand the power of forgiveness. Um, and yes, I mean, forgiveness has played a role in my own journey as well. And I think it sounds to me, and just from reading what you're doing with connecting to cope, is that for as part of your journey and as part of the forgiveness of yourself, that you've dedicated now your life to helping others find their way back to the light.
That is
Um,
so true. Yep.
yeah. Yeah. So, um, and I mean, that's what you hope when we make mistakes in life. Once we know better, we do better, and we try better, and we heal.
Yeah,
Um,
I always say that I get up every day and I try to be a little bit better than the day before. Some days I fail miserably. Some
mhm,
days I stay the same, and some days, and those are wonderful days for me, I succeed. And when I was in prison, when I was in Pekin, Illinois, at a minimum security, I started out in prison in Waseca, Minnesota, which is a low to medium prison. Um, different story, and anyone out there who's listening who has incarceration as part of their past trauma or current trauma, or have someone who is incarcerated, it is a world in itself. Something that I thought I'd never experience, and something that you just cannot prepare for. And so it forms its own trauma in your head. And for me, like I say, it was part of my healing journey, because I knew I never wanted to be back there. And I knew if I didn't heal, that something else would happen. If I wasn't healed, I saw what it did to myself, to others around me, to my family, by taking myself away from them.
mhm,
But it also started my healing journey. And while I was there, I made a deal with myself that if I could get through this, and if I could work on myself, that my goal was to come out the other end and help people. Now, help is a big word, right? We're going to help people. How are you going to do that? So when I got out, I got a golden doodle. His name is Cope.
No.
And I named him Cope before I even got him. And I got out during the pandemic. So it was just Cope and I at home.
Hmm.
Um, and I was still on house arrest, so I couldn't go anywhere. So we bonded, and thus the name Connecting to Cope. So there's two versions for that: connecting to cope, meaning connecting with others using coping skills, and also me connecting to my dog and hoping other people can find something in their life to connect to. It doesn't have to be a dog, it can be a person, it can be, meditation, whatever that is. But that is why I formed Connecting to Cope. That is where that came from. And so now I'm, trying to find others, find ways to cope, to deal with their trauma, just to start talking about their trauma, things that they've been through, and the life path that unresolved trauma can take them through. And if I can get someone at a younger age or even at my age to not have to go through what I did and not to hurt others the way I did, then Connecting to Cope and everything that I've done is well worth it.
I think that's just beautiful. And dogs have this wonderful way of showing us unconditional love, the way we're supposed to love each other, really, right?
Exactly.
I mean, I find that my dogs are my biggest teachers about the way I should be behaving, and they give me a lot more leeway than I probably deserve. um, but it's important to. I feel like every day I get this lessening unconditional love that shows me what I'm supposed to be doing when I leave the house. Do
They do that. My daughter-in-law has a sign in her house, and it says, "Be the person your dog thinks you are."
you-
And that right there just says it all every time I read it. And I'm like, that is true. Try to be that person, because
Yeah,
I know that, I'm my dog's world. And that's a big job to be.
it
But
is.
yet, when you think about that and you think, just try to be that person, try to be that person that he thinks you are. That's a great mantra and a great foundation for who you should be on a daily basis.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I don't really talk a bunch about different types of religion or anything, but there is one thing about dogs, and if you spell it backwards, it's
It's
God.
God. Yep.
And so if you look, I always look at the relationship that I have with my pups, that's how God loves you. So
Exactly.
even when you are at your worst, you have this unconditional love. It's a good reminder to have for sure. So I'm glad that you have Cope with you.
Oh yeah, he's amazing, and he just turned 5, and he's wonderful. He's my companion, and sometimes he kicks my husband out of bed at night, and it's a whole thing. So anyway, he's amazing. So I'm very lucky to have him in my life. And again, he reminds me of what I want to do for other people. Will I
Yeah.
be as good as Cope? No, I know I won't be. I'm human. I can't, give unconditional love every day, because that's almost impossible as a human being. But can we work on it? Try to do it. Can I use the platform of Connecting to Cope to try to share with others that that's the way I want to live and I want to help them? And that I also use Connecting to Cope for some advocacy, just because we need to change our prison system. I
Mhm.
never knew that. I never would have been that person because I was blind and oblivious to it, as I would say 75% of our population is. But we have the highest recidivism rate in the world. We have the most women incarcerated. So the US women's incarceration population is higher than the rest of the world combined. Other countries rehabilitate. The US has a hard time using rehabilitation in the prison systems. And I really hope that we can get legislation passed, that we can start looking at those people and giving them a second chance, because I firmly believe myself, I am not the worst thing that I did.
Right.
That is part of me, and that is something I need to remember.
Mhm.
daily. So I try not to repeat that. But that is not the total picture of myself. And some days it's hard to remember that, but I want to help other people remember that they are not the worst thing they've ever done.
Mhm.
And that's my goal. That's one of my goals of connecting to cope. So,
That's a really good goal.
yep.
So I have a question. So when you were incarcerated and you were doing this work with your therapist, did you and you've observed and what you're saying about the prison system, I'm sure will resonate with so many. But did you form relationships with other inmates who were like you and they wanted a path forward? Did you form relationships and talk about what needed to happen or wanting to change yourself?
Oh, yes. I wish I could tell you, so because I think some people have the idea that prison is full of people who are just hateful, and there are people who are hateful of themselves and of others, but there are so many people, especially women, who, like me, were abused or were raised in families where crime was expected or drugs were expected, or at some point in their life they probably expected to be in some form of a penile system in our country. And then there's some like me who are just, plain Midwest or Southern or wherever they came from, women who never expected to be in a situation like they were in. And because of the fact that they didn't deal with things that had happened to them, they didn't do the work, they didn't identify um, their issues, because we all have our personal issues.
Mhm.
They ended up the same way I did. And I keep in touch with many of them. I hope to have many of them on my podcast at some point and, talk about what leads women to do things like commit a crime that ends up in federal incarceration. So many of us, Kelly, so many people, so many good, wonderful people. And um, I just never knew we were all out there. And so I
Mm.
have a good nucleus to talk to if I have to run an idea off somebody, if I have an issue with someone I'm talking to. They are a huge sounding board, and I'm very thankful for that as well.
That is good to hear. I think that we on the outside we don't get enough of a glimpse inside to see what's happening, and as you said, with reform that needs to happen, um, we just we just don't know. Um, and so it's good to see that you have made those bonds and that there's other people that you met when you were incarcerated who were on that same path. And so, which further, um, solidifies the need for more of a how can we reform the system so that we are looking at healing the wounds and making people ready to be back in society once they're released. Um,
Exactly. Exactly. And, that's a twofold step for women in incarceration, or women who have unresolved trauma. So if you've already been incarcerated and you haven't done the work, we need to. There are programs available. So I will give the FBOP, which is the Federal Bureau of Prisons, credit that there are classes, there are people available to people within in prison. There's not enough.
mhm,
If you are not forceful, and if you do not want to do the work and you are pushing to do the work and getting into the classes that they offer, you don't have to. So it's all elective. I think some of those classes probably need to be non elective. So even if you don't want to be there and you don't get the full aspect, hopefully you take something away and you're
mhm,
not just laying it, quote unquote, in your bunk all day, waiting for your time to be done and going out and going back to what you were doing. Another thing that I am going to try to do and am trying to do is get people to start healing before they make that big mistake, the mistake that could lead to something like I did.
mhm.
And so I'd like to talk to young people, more young people. I talk to some more young people, more people in their 20s, I know how much abuse and how much trauma is out there, and we all have a different definition of that word. But with connecting to cope, I'd really like to speak to more, whether that be in schools. I've spoken some churches, and it's just a good way and a good talk, and maybe a realization that if something happened to you, many times it's not your fault. I would say 99% of the time it's not your fault. And you can heal. And there are people out there to help you to heal. And there are adults that are willing to help you do that. And so that's something that I really want to get through. And that is another goal of connecting to cope. And something else about the incarceration part. Not going to get political here at all
Oh,
because I agree with some politicians, don't agree with others. I agree with a politician, some things he does, some things he doesn't. But something great that is out there. And if there's any of your viewers who are out there and they don't know about this, there is a act called the First Step Act. And that was passed during President Trump's first term, and that is a great bill. And if you would like to, it's just the First Step Act. You can look it up on any computer. And there are many programs that your loved one or yourself can take advantage of to better yourself, to lower your time actually in a prison system area where you can come home and get a job and start working on yourself. So I just encourage people to read that bill because it
mhm.
really is a good one. Charles Grassley was huge in it. He's an Iowa senator, and he was also very influential in getting that passed. And that helped me.
Yeah.
So, and I know many people still don't know about it to this day. The FBOP resists it because they don't want to let people out early, but it is there and you can take advantage of it.
Okay. And that gives you resources that you need for healing and
Yep. Healing work, by taking the classes I'm talking about in prison to gain healing, um, will give you quote unquote credits. I'm not going to get into all of it, how it works, but by taking the classes I spoke about and that are offered there, you can lower your time actually in
in the
the
system.
institution. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And get home. I mean, you're still under BOP policy at home, but you can work, you can see your family easier. It's just part of the road back to society. And I think that every prisoner, um, most every prisoner, I can't say every, has a way back to being a, productive citizen if they choose to do the work. And it's hard work. But if you're ready to do it, then there it is. There's so many different ways you can do, therapy, cognitive therapy, EMDR. Those are things that I used.
Yeah.
Um, Emotional interviewing. There's many ways to help. So
Hey guys, Kelly here. I wanted to jump in and let you know that you can find out more about my work by visiting my website at kellybuckley.com, or you can find my books on Amazon. Okay, back to the episode. I just want to talk about the moment where you realized, because it's a lovely thing when you realize that I can take my brokenness and I can turn it into something beautiful. When was that moment where you were like, when you first glimpsed the possibility of your life turning a corner and helping others? When did that hit you when that you could do this?
so I don't know if I had a moment. I had a couple moments, and we said we were, that you don't touch a lot on religion here. And I know we're also not supposed to ever make deals with God. But when I was in prison, I was telling you that I believed that if I could heal myself, I could help heal others with the work. And I did make a deal. If you help me get through this, if, I give my life over to you, I believe that I can help others. So that was one of my moments. And I got an answer yes, if you're willing to do the work, I'm always willing to do the work with you. Another breaking moment that really, I think, made me realize that I do have a voice for this is I was teaching a class. I worked in education in prison. I had a great job. I was also a driver, which are two coveted jobs within the prison system. Got paid a whole 14 cents an hour for my work,
Mm.
and basically ran the education department. But we had so many people who did not even have GEDs. And
Mm.
so we had classes, of course, to help them get their GEDs, but we also had, personal empowerment classes. How do you write a resume? How do you do a job interview? How do you just think better of yourself? And I taught a few of those classes. And when people would start stopping me on the yard and just saying, "Can I just talk to you about what we talked about in class today?" Or what you said in class today made me think that maybe I can do this, that maybe I can come out the other side a better person. And phrases like that from people who I really didn't know within our little compound. And I think at that point, I thought I am being led in this direction.
Mm.
And I've always had a voice where I could speak. No problem getting my point across. I did some training, spoke to groups before my situation led to prison. And so I thought, why not take that talent and that gift and help others? And I have to tell you, it helps me too. It reminds me of who I want to be. So if I want to, talk the talk, I better walk the walk. And that is what I try to do every day. So those are kind of my two shining moments or two empowering moments of, yes, I can do this. And yes, this is what I want to do. And the main goal is to help others. And in turn, I help myself. So
That's beautiful, and I mean, essentially, and we talked about this a little bit before we pressed record. That this podcast is about that. It's about sharing our stories and showing people possibility. I I think that's beautiful. I was picturing it in my mind as you were saying it. Someone coming up to you in the yard and saying, "Can we continue that conversation?" And for some people, we don't realize the power of a moment that we can affect change with just a few little words of encouragement. I think we sometimes walk through life and we think that everybody has that same knowledge of how to have a positive mindset or how to have, and for the most part, people don't. People don't understand how to feel good about themselves or how to get to a place where they can feel good about themselves. You talked about a lot of women didn't have their GED. That backs women into a corner when they are released.
it
Um,
does.
it creates an environment where it they have a higher rate of, maybe recommitting a crime because they don't have the education that they need to get maybe a job that would help them turn the corner themselves. So I love what you're saying about the education piece of it because it's it's like a lifeline. When you can educate yourself and when you can find that, that's a lifeline for somebody.
It is. It is. And to believe in yourself that you can do it is, something else that I tried to get through to the people that I was incarcerated with, who are my fellow inmates. Um, it's just, I remember another enlightening moment. I'm just going to share it because I think it's worth it.
Yep.
I had him do an exercise in my class. I had 18 women in my class. That was the maximum amount, and we were full every quarter. We did 9-week sessions, and one of the exercises that I had my gals do um, was to. I said, "Tell me who you are. I want you to write a page, just a page. Tell me who you are, and within that, I need to have at least 3 positive attributes as to who you are." I mean, if you feel like you need to say something negative about yourself and that's who you are at this point, that's fine. But I know every person in this room has at least 3 positive attributes that they can share with me to get through to me who you are. And it broke my heart that even in my darkest times, I could probably find 3. I was a good mom, I was this, I was that. And some women had such a hard time finding out what were good attributes, why were they good, in who they were in the big picture of things. They couldn't find three positive statements to say about themselves. And so we worked on that. It was like a self empowerment class, and we worked on that, tell me about yourself. And so when they tell you verbally, I'd pick out the good things, and I'd
Yeah.
be like, this is so good, this is so good. um, and I think stepping out of that class every week, most, I can't say all because that would be a lie, most people came out saying, okay, maybe I do have these attributes that I can use when I get out of here to make my life more fulfilling and to see some success, and, to avoid recidivism.
Hmm.
And that made, I think, everybody in the class, we had a lot of clapping and a lot of crying, and a lot of woohoos, because it's hard for a woman sometimes to admit those things, especially when you are where we were. But that is also another, I think, empowering moment. And so when I talk to people now, I tell them, tell me something good about yourself. Tell me what's good about you. And some people still have a hard time doing that. So that's kind of
Hmm.
where I stand on that one.
Yeah. I love that you had the opportunity to do that. That was the very origins for connecting to cope. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, it was.
you started it quite early.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
So that was very good. And again, I am so thankful to my sisters from incarceration, and they help me all the time. So I'm very fortunate that I made wonderful friends who are wonderful friends and wonderful people, wonderful moms, and just made a very poor choice. And we will all put the word very in front of it. But sometimes those very poor choices lead to resilience, which lead to finding out what you can be grateful for in your life.
Hmm. And we are all imperfect beings. We all have good days and bad days, days where we're kind, days where we're not. And we have to, I think one of the greatest lessons I've ever learned in my life is um, giving people grace. And you learn that when you see people give you grace, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Um, I want to ask you a question about making amends. And the reason that I want to present this to you is that I work with a lot of people who have a lot of loose threads that are still hanging out there, a lot of unresolved things that have happened to them. They haven't had resolution, whether it be with another person or just a situation where maybe they lost a loved one and they will never have the full story. Um, for you, you have some loose ends that will be out there. We talked about a little earlier in the show, right? Um,
Hmm.
what would you say to those people about how you deal with that day to day, how you can kind of put that in its place, but still make peace with yourself and continue on your positive journey? What would you say to them?
Well, first of all, I want to say I don't think I just have loose threads, but, frayed jeans, because I've got a lot of stuff going on there. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, and a lot of us do have that much that, maybe we're regretful for, we have remorse, we have guilt for. And I still have all those things,
Mhm.
and I deal with them. I'm in constant, I still go to therapy all the time. I do EMDR
Yeah.
to try to remember and put into perspective some of the things that happened to me, and also some of the things that I did to others. um, I also live by the mantra that I can't even change something I did a second ago. So if I want to go back and re-answer a question in this podcast, I can. And I don't. I mean, I think our conversation has been wonderful, but even if I wanted to, I couldn't. So that is a self-realization in your head that we can't turn back the clock, and we just have to deal with the choices we made, and again, try to be better. Making amends with both myself and making amends with the people who I hurt, as well as the people who hurt me, are still difficult subjects. Um, So I couldn't talk to my victims for the longest time. It's something that you're not allowed to do. However, you can, like write a letter to the court, and your judge can then put that letter out to all your victims. And that's a very small token of asking for forgiveness or saying you're sorry, or however you want to do that. But I did that. That was my first step
Mm-hmm.
in saying that, I hope to make you whole, um, both mentally and financially, and that is something that I will work on.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that I work on daily. And that though we may never cross paths again, I want it to get that, I hope that you can get to the point where if you hear my name on a podcast or you hear my name on the news, that even if you have no thoughts of me, that they're not, I want to, run through the TV and, rip her out through the TV, that kind of a violent reaction. And I know some people were that way, especially the people I knew.
Mm-hmm.
And I also hope that people who don't know my whole story and just heard, the quote unquote bad parts of my story will look into my whole story. That is something that for me, making amends with myself and making amends with my community is a huge, huge part. Um, I had to make amends with myself. I work on that daily with my family. I have two wonderful boys, by the way, who've given me 4 grandchildren, and I can't thank them enough.
Oh.
Um, and we have good relationships. I will not say great. I will not say bad. I will say that we have good relationships that we work on all the time. And we have become open and honest with each other. I have one son who is like my husband. He doesn't talk much, doesn't say much, just kind of keeps it all under the cuff. And I have another one who is like me, who says exactly what he needs to say whenever it is that he needs to say it. And we can butt heads, but I think we're at a point where I know he loves me and he knows I love him, and bad choices are made by good people, and that I am trying to fix all that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a wonderful thing. And again, back to my victims, it's always hard for me to talk about my victims because I do feel true remorse for what I did to them, both those I know and both I don't know. And unfortunately, you were part of my non-healed journey. And that is not an excuse. I did it. I made the choices to do what I did, and will forever be regretful and remorseful for doing those things. And I'm trying to make amends. And that's where I am. That's all I can do at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so tying up loose ends, do what you can.
Yeah.
Be true to yourself. If you can't ever talk to that person again, because there's a couple I can't. My perpetrator, I can never talk to again because he is no longer here. He has since died. But
Mm-hmm.
I did write him a letter. And you can do that, whether it's asking them for forgiveness or you telling them you forgive them. Those are great, great coping skills, great activities. Journaling, just journaling about the situation, even if it's not a direct letter to that person, that can help you as well. And then just realizing that the past is the past and that you can't change it. And just try to get better and, kind of even out the good with the bad. So
Yeah.
that's where I am.
Um, I think, and I thank you for being incredibly honest about how difficult it is for you to speak about it, and I think really self-aware of the feelings of your victims. I think I really thank you for being quite open about that. Um, if you so as you guide people through their healing, so you've got your website connected to hope, and your goal of helping people, I think, is wonderful. I was looking at your website. It's lovely, and it's got such great information on it. um how do you protect your own heart and your own healing as you help other people? And this is a great question, because this is something that I have had to work on as an individual.
Yep.
People
Yep.
as well, right?
Because, talking about, or if you're trying to help someone and they still are in the depth of their pain, of course they're going to have some comments back to you about what you've been through. And that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, Kelly, tried to be an open book about what I suffered through because I know I have to protect myself, but I also know in order to help others that a lot of that protection needs to go away. And, sometimes I will need a therapy session after trying to talk to somebody else because everything comes piling back to me. Or
Mm-hmm.
I'll remember something when they bring something up. And so that will trigger my trauma. And I'm so fortunate that I'm at the point in my healing journey that I can usually control that at the time, and then,
Yeah.
have my little breakdown and have to use my coping skills later. And but I think that I truly am an open book. If you have a question about what I did, how it affected my marriage, my relationship with my kids, the rest of my family, my community, and most of all, how it affected me, um, because my thing too is the only person that you can control and heal is yourself. And so I really talk about that to the people that I speak to about healing and about finding coping skills and about making the act of self-care be such an important part of who you are, as well as pulling yourself up by your bootstraps after you get out of incarceration. And I think I'm
Mm-hmm.
just an open book. I think that is how I handle it. Some people don't, but I will deal with my own issues afterwards. And sometimes it brings up something that I needed to fix. So sometimes I'm grateful to the people I speak to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that answered your question,
No, that
but that's
it
kind of where
did.
I'm at. So,
Yeah, it did, and I find as well, people know if you're holding back, especially in situations. I find in the work that I've been doing, if I talk to other people who are bereaved, who've been through horrendous circumstances, they know if you're holding something back, or if you're not being real. They really
oh
do,
yeah,
because they're there, they're in it. And so, what you're saying, that really resonates with me, because you have to show up as is, right?
yep,
And I think the courage that people see when someone says, "Oh yeah, I'm a mess," or "I'm broken," or but that's okay, because I'm broken, but I'm putting myself back together. Not
yep.
quite the same as I was before.
Nope, it's just like a crumpled piece of paper. You're never going to be totally straight and smooth again. But
No.
sometimes maybe we're better. We have more character with all those lines that are in that paper. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, in the whole thing, my if the whole theme of this podcast, Broken Beautiful Me, the logo for the podcast is a stained glass heart, and it's all cracked. It's based on the Japanese art of kintsugi. So
oh,
when a ceramic bowl is broken, it is repaired with plaster with gold fleck in it, gold paper, and so they repair the ceramic dish, and
hmm,
the gold lines are within it, and so it's actually more valuable because it's broken.
that that is a great analogy, and I think that actually kind of puts all of us who are healing and all of us who are broken and some days still a hot mess, because
Yeah.
there's many a days where I still am a hot mess. I wish I could tell you that I'm not, but I can't. I think that if you look at that and hold that analogy and that picture in your mind, that you can say, okay, I am still beautiful. I may have been broken, but I am working every day to be, healed and to be beautiful, and
Yeah.
yeah, a joy to people around me and a help to people around me. So that's what I try.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, if you could sit with a version of yourself before all of this happened, the version of yourself, the young person who felt maybe unworthy of grace or redemption, before before you really knew kind of identified the trauma and then worked through it. If you could sit with that young girl, what would you say to her?
So this is kind of, I'll give you the answer I give in therapy because my therapist is a good one. And she asks me this frequently to see if my answers change. And they do as I get, I think, healthier,
Mhm.
both mentally, physically, the whole nine yards. I think those answers do change. But I know we all, not all, many of us use a phrase. And I actually got the greatest necklace. I was going to wear it today. I got it for Mother's Day for my boys. And it says, I am worthy. And I think that what I would try to resonate to myself, to that young girl who is so hurt and so broken, is I would say, you are worthy. You are worthy of success. You are worthy of friendships. You are worthy of love. And you are worthy of loving yourself.
Mhm.
And I know there's going to be many times in your journey that you are not going to believe that. But if you could just hold on to one small tidbit of that phrase, I think you're going to go a lot further. And I think maybe I could help you avoid having all the hurts and pains that you are going to go through.
Mhm.
Um, if I could talk to the gal who was right after I turned myself in, because I did turn myself in for my crime, I took my computer in to a friend of mine, actually. Little quick story here. And he told me, Ranae, you need a lawyer. I don't know what you did. Go find one, whatever. And then I turned myself in there as well. I could have went on for years doing what I was doing, unfortunately. And I'm glad that I did not. I'm glad that I hit my bottom there, and I'm glad I didn't hurt any more people.
Mhm.
And, but if I could tell her something, I would say, today is the day, and you are doing the right thing today. And work on healing, work harder than you've ever worked in your whole entire life, so that maybe you can't make everything right and you can't straighten out your paper and you can't do all the things that are there, but you can still have a good life, and just hold on to that through this whole journey. And at the other end, hopefully you can help others. And that is the total goal of Connecting to Cope, is to help resonate that you can heal. It takes work, and you can have a good life. It takes work. All good lives take work. All good relationships take work, but you can do it, and it is so worth it.
Mm. That's wonderful. So,
Mm-hmm.
for people who want to go to your website, um, so speak
My
to
website is
people.
www.connectingtocope.com, and they can sign up on there. And we are going to start this fall with a newsletter of some helpful things. They also right now get like some coping skills, a very small coping skill guide, just very easy things that you can do if you are having issues with dealing with everyday life or dealing with big trauma or whatever. There's all kinds of little helpful hints that you get by signing up. And I also have an Instagram account and a Facebook page,
Mhm.
and Connecting to Cope, and hashtag Connecting to Cope for Instagram. And that's where we sit. And I hope you read my blogs. I have quite a few blogs on Connecting to Cope about different things that happen to me, different things that happen to others, where I write about them. Some justice reform that I talk about. I talk about the Chrisleys being released and how great that was, but how we need to release more people, and our recidivism rates, and self-care, and taking a walk, and journaling. And it's just a whole hodgepodge of things that are in my head on a certain day, and I write about them. Setting boundaries,
Mm.
letting go of friendships that sometimes you need to go because they're toxic and damaging. You name it, it's on there, Kelly.
Well,
It's just what's in my head for that day.
that's good because I mean, life is a hodgepodge, right? Like,
It
it is
is.
a little bit of everything, and you do feel. I know if you go on my website and look at the blogs I've written over the years, I mean, sometimes an idea pops in my head, and I'm like, "Where did that come from?" but
Yep.
but
Got
it
to go
came
with
from
it when
somewhere.
it's
You
there.
gotta listen to that little nudge and follow it, right?
Yep.
So we will have all of those links in our show notes so that
Okay.
people can find your website and your Instagram account. I visited all of those before we chatted today, and it looks so great. And I really hope that um, that you can help many many people who need it on this journey because um, at some point or another, we all look for forgiveness, redemption, and hope. And it sounds like you are taking the events that happen in your life and you are doing just that. So thank you
I am
so
certainly
much.
trying. And same to you, Kelly. As you helping others, your podcast is amazing with all the people that it reaches. And I'm thankful for you as well. And I'm very happy and very glad I got to be on your show today.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Renee. It was a pleasure having you, and your courage and your openness and your honesty is something the world needs a little more of. So I am quite thankful that we're going to have this episode for people to listen to shortly. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Bye bye now.
Thank you for joining me today on Broken Beautiful Me. I hope you found today's episode inspiring and insightful. Remember, every scar tells a story, and every story has the power to heal. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. Your support means the world to me, and it helps spread the message of hope and resilience to more people like us. Don't forget to leave a review and share this podcast with your friends and family. Together, we can create a community of strength and beauty in our brokenness. Until next time, stay strong, stay beautiful, and keep shining.